This episode is brought to you by Netflix. This Monday night, witness the end of an era. John Cena takes center stage for his final appearance ever on Monday Night Raw. One last match, one unforgettable farewell. Come celebrate the legacy of a true WWE legend. Monday Night Raw, November 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, only on Netflix. Be there for the moment everyone will be talking about.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk,
Saturday is absolutely going to be the biggest game of the season for Oklahoma as the Sooners travel to Tuscaloosa to take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. I've gone back and forth so many times on that statement that this is the biggest game of the season for Oklahoma, because first it was Texas, right? That was the biggest game of the season. Didn't go well. Then you had Ole Miss, biggest game of the season. Then you had Knoxville against Tennessee, biggest game of the season. But, man, this is it. There's so much on the line for Oklahoma in this game. I think you have to pivot this, mark it down, not just the biggest game of the season, but quite possibly the biggest game in the 4 years that Brent Venables has been the head coach at Oklahoma. It's one of those weeks where it's one of those weekends where the whole season seems to funnel into Saturday. And that's where Oklahoma stands right now. The College Football Playoff Committee moved them to number 11 this week. Basically, the first team out. We talked about that in the last episode here on the Sooner Nation podcast. Everything the Sooners do over the next 3 Saturdays either cements them as a legitimate playoff threat, or it sends them kind of scrapping around for help. And this trip, this Saturday, Tuscaloosa, it is that defining moment. You win there, and everything else is manageable. You're pretty much in. But if you lose, the math gets ugly on you. And so let's walk through why I think that's true. Let's walk through what has helped Oklahoma to this point and where maybe questions remain, and why Alabama, under Kalen DeBoer now is kind of still its own brand of danger, At 7-2, 3-2 in conference play, Oklahoma, they're not a Cinderella story. They're a team with a compact resume that asks for one more big moment. Just give me one more moment to prove you belong. And I think the committee's message is pretty simple. You've earned the right to have a seat at the table. Now give us a reason to put some food in front of you, right? Give us a reason to put you in the playoff. And I think a top 5 win over Alabama at Bryant-Denny Stadium, there's your reason right there. If you do that, the pathway to 10-2 for Oklahoma, you finish by beating Alabama, you handle Missouri, you handle LSU, both at home. That pathway looks really, really clean. Now, if they don't win on Saturday, that same pathway becomes dependent on other results. And that's the difference. That's the difference between controlling your own destiny and really kind of begging for mercy from somewhere else. And if you want to stick on some positive notes here, Oklahoma's late season rhythm has really come from 3 connected threads, right? More consistent offensive execution, a defense that is tightened in key situations, and the emergence of a running game that can chew clock and set the tone. And I think number 3 and number 1 are really connected here. But offensively, John Mateer has settled into the role that I think the staff expected him to be. He's efficient, he's decisive, he's willing to run when the pocket collapses, and generally kind of steady in-game management. His mobility and decision-making on third down have really kind of kept drives alive for Oklahoma, and that's what matters when you're trying to win on the road in hostile environments. The team's rushing numbers have ticked up as well. Xavier Robinson, you look at what he's done over the last few games, that's been the difference maker. He's become that physical downhill runner who helps sustain drives and keeps the clock moving, and that helps hide other inconsistencies that are there, particularly within the passing game. Defensively, Brent Venables and that group, they've shown a pattern of bend but don't break. We saw that against Tennessee. We saw that in many aspects against Ole Miss. They may give up yards early, but they've been much better at making the critical third down stops and situational plays in the second half. The way they're adjusting has been pretty spectacular. It shows maturity from earlier in the season, and I think maturity not just with the 11 guys on the field, but maturity with the guys that are coaching them up on the sideline. That's exactly what you need as well when you're looking at winning a big game on the road. But if you look at the tape for the Sooners, it also shows some real issues here. You're still dealing with turnovers. You're still dealing with penalties, particularly at inopportune moments. And at times, the offense does look a little bit too dependent on the run or throw off, dump off to the safety valve, when that line of scrimmage starts getting a little bit overwhelmed. And the other structural problem here, I think, is schedule perception. We've talked so much about Oklahoma's schedule, and it's been the gauntlet that we thought it was, but it's not going to be to close out when you look at the Tigers, right? Missouri and LSU. They lose some punch, the Sooners do, in their strength of schedule with these two teams. Missouri sliding out of the rankings, it makes Oklahoma, look, that remaining slate look a little bit lighter on paper. And to me, I think that pushes more emphasis onto this game with Alabama. Because if the Sooners can't win in Tuscaloosa, their remaining home games, they won't have the same signature weight that we thought they were going to have 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago even. And so that shortens, that thins up the margin for error. Now, the good news is Oklahoma had an idle week before they take this trip to Alabama. But that could also be a double-edged sword. Like, on one hand, you got extra prep and rest, particularly for, banged up bodies. So that can be huge. And coaches love the ability to install, to correct, to polish. You throw in some wrinkles, right? That's all good stuff. But the flip side of that as well is that rhythm can cool off. What you had going in Knoxville, that was 2 weeks ago now. But I would have leaned towards the positive here because I believe Venables and the staff, I believe they've used this week to sharpen details. I believe they've used this for situational reps. I believe special teams alignment, cleaning up third down leverage, working on the mentality for those penalties. And I think you also have to instill a sense of urgency. And if they get all that done, if they get all that taken care of, especially also health-wise, that bye work probably is a gift from God, But let's talk about Alabama for just a minute, because you're 2 seasons away from Nick Saban's departure. Their program still elite, still being guided by Kalen DeBoer. He obviously took a hit, had a little bit of learning curve. I think is more of that, but he's got this identity back. They're physical. They're disciplined. They look so good defensively the other night against LSU. And they're trying to restore that offensive fluidity, but still, man, they're rolling. But I think the defense is what's been the constant here. They've been stout against the run. They've been quick to fill lanes. They've been opportunistic and forcing turnovers and giving themselves short fields. And if you watch them this year, what you've seen from the defensive side of the ball is a unit that shows up in November and kind of grinds opponents down. And I know everyone still wants to go back to September and talk about that Florida State game, but if you've listened to me, you know the concern that was there with the injury situation on this defense. It's not like that anymore. And on the offensive side of the ball, you've got a mature quarterback in Ty Simpson that I think he's a Heisman caliber type guy having that type of season. You look at his touchdown interception ratio. He gives the Tide big play capability through the air, and he's got the weapons. And Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, those guys can stretch the field. So that combination creates some stress for any defense. What I mean by that is if you play too soft, they're going to explode on you. If you play too aggressive, they're going to squeeze you in their intermediate game, and then they're going to run the ball at you. So Brent Venables has to kind of walk this delicate balance in attacking this Alabama offense. So let's get tactical here. What matchups matter the most on Saturday afternoon? I think for Oklahoma, you look at the offensive line versus Alabama's front seven. I think that's where you start. You've got a young line that if they can win early run battles and give John Mateer time, the Sooners can keep drives alive and they can keep Alabama off the field. You look at everything you did against Tennessee, you want to duplicate in Tuscaloosa. Because like the Volunteers, the Tide feed off of negative plays. And so limiting those is going to be huge. You look at Xavier Robinson versus Alabama's linebackers. The ability that he has to run between the tackles, it removes the pass rush's rhythm, and it can force Alabama to respect the run and move away from the blitz, or at least tone them down a little bit. That's what you want. I think you got to look, number 3, at third down defense and situational football. Brent Venables and this group, they have to win third down. They have to stay disciplined in the red zone. They have to, on the defensive side of the ball, they've got to force Alabama drives that are going to be long. Nothing quick, nothing fast. Make them earn every yard. Because when you do that, it kind of takes the influence from the crowd out a little bit. And you can slowly gain control of the game by controlling time of possession. And I think you look at special teams. Field position in this stadium, particularly, it matters. Small edges, punt coverage, returns, kick placement. Those type of things can change the scoreboard more than just a single defensive stop. And you look at how big Tate Sandell was in Knoxville. But I think if you take these 4 aspects, right, these are, we'll call them micro battles. I think if Oklahoma executes these 4 micro battles, then they blunt Alabama's advantages and they give themselves a real shot to win this game. But if you fail in 1 or 2 of them, the Tides, they're going to turn that into a big score weekend. So here's the big picture. The playoff committee has basically said to Oklahoma, show us a signature win, right? Because as we talked about in the previous episode, the home loss to Ole Miss and the road win in Knoxville, they counterbalance, right? They cancel each other out. That's why there's so much emphasis here. And that's a narrative control decision. It's not a pure analytics call here. The Sooners control that narrative with a win this Saturday. You win in Tuscaloosa, and you reframe this season as a breakthrough season. A team that didn't just arrive, but it really imposed itself. But if you lose, you're left hoping that, other top teams trip up. You're hoping that Texas drops its games to A&M, or I guess Georgia this weekend, and then A&M. You're hoping that Notre Dame somehow trips up. And man, that's just a bad situation to be in late November. So the question is not really, can Oklahoma beat Alabama? The Sooners have the athletes. They've got the coaching. They've got situational wins already on their resume. But the question is this, whether the Sooners can come out and set the tone in the first quarter. Can they be physical? Can they be decisive? And can they make the Tide defend their home field for 4 quarters rather than kind of snowball away in the second half? So here's the bottom line, Sooner Nation. This is the kind of game that November was built for. You got a program's reputation. that can pivot on a single Saturday. Oklahoma has the roadmap. Play tough up front, protect the football, win third down, and make the Tide earn every yard. You do that, the potential for the playoff door to swing wide open is right there. If you don't do that, you're going to be watching scoreboard updates on the next 2 Saturdays, praying for some chaos. But you know us. We'll be here watching every snap with you, and I hope you're enjoying the Sooner Nation podcast. I'm thankful that you're here. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you leave us a rating. Make sure you tell your friends about us, and, make sure to come back for more. Speaking of more, we've got some coming up right after this.
Kay Jewelers' early Black Friday sale is happening now. Get up to 50% off Black Friday deals and up to 40% off everything else. Don't miss this sale. Start your season with savings, only at Kay. Exclusions apply. See Kay.com/exclusions for details.
Welcome back. So what I want to do in this segment, I want to narrow in on some of the X factors for this matchup Saturday with Oklahoma at Alabama. So we're not just talking about a game, all right? This is a crucible. This is where a handful of critical moments are going to decide whether the Sooners take control, maintain control of their playoff destiny, or whether Alabama is just going to go back to being the dominant Alabama Crimson Tide team that we're used to seeing. So let's break down what each team must do, what each team must avoid, and how a few subtle edges could determine the outcome. Let's start with Oklahoma. I got 3 big things that stand out. I think you start with the quarterback composure in a hostile environment. With John Mateer, you saw what he did in Knoxville, and 90% of it was great. But it's that 10% that scares Oklahoma fans. It's that 10%. It's that RPO and choosing to pass in the fourth quarter against Tennessee when you're up 2 scores. Mateer came to Norman with high expectations. And I don't think you can deny his physical tools, but I think what the committee and the coaching staff, what they want to see now is, how does he lead under fire? In Tuscaloosa, you got the crowd behind the Tide. You got the pressure of the moment. You've got the size of the venue. All of those things amplify mistakes. So basically, it's Knoxville 2.0, but the good news is it's not at night. But you saw John Mateer make a critical error in the fourth quarter. And if he makes 1 or 2 turnovers early in this game, it's not going to be just a setback. It's going to set the tone for the whole game. But if he stays calm, if he uses his legs, if he gets the ball out, if he takes what's there, then Oklahoma gives itself a chance to dictate, and that's exactly where you want to be. So I don't think his composure I don't think it's a situation where it's nice to have it. I think it's a situation where Oklahoma must have it. I think the second thing you look at for Oklahoma is limiting Alabama's big plays. This is putting the X factor solely on the Sooners' defense. And when you look at all Alabama's offense, you got a quarterback in Ty Simpson. You've got big play threat receivers. They're going to try to hit you vertically. They're going to try to stretch you horizontally. And then they're going to try to impose themselves physically. And we love this front 7 from Oklahoma. But the secondary, they've got to work to limit explosive plays. No chunk gains. No easy throws. No runaway pace. The best way Oklahoma can stay in control is by forcing Alabama into those long drives, that drive-by-drive football, not highlight reel touchdowns. When big plays go your way, the crowd stays quiet. Momentum shifts. And if Oklahoma can make this a kind of a slog type, environment for Alabama rather than a sprint, I think they enhance their chances dramatically here. But here's the third X factor here. How does this team respond when things go wrong? Because there will be moments. There will be moments when things go wrong. And that's when you look at your leadership. That's when you look at how you believe and who you are. Tennessee was scored first in Knoxville. And Oklahoma showed some resilience. But what happens if Alabama jumps ahead early? What happens if that crowd is going? What happens if their confidence is rising? Can Oklahoma continue to be resilient, or is the opportunity there for them to fold? They've got to be able to cancel out the noise and execute. And that's when you look at leadership. That's when you look at veteran players. That's when you look at composure from your quarterback, the discipline from this coaching staff. All that matters in this moment. We're looking for Oklahoma to show us the mark of a contender. And it's not how they avoid adversity. It's how they navigate it and recover from it. And if Oklahoma shows belief and poise, then this game remains theirs to shape. But if they let Alabama control the story, it becomes a test of survival, not of dominance. Now, I want to look, there's some X factors here for Alabama as well. So if you flip the lens and you look at the Tide, they've got their own keys to unlock, and they've got their own pitfalls to avoid. Like, can Alabama stay efficient on early downs? They may be right there with all the eyeballs tuning in. They may be the team in the SEC that everyone's talking about, despite the fact that Texas A&M is still undefeated. But the biggest issue in recent games for Alabama has been offensive inconsistency. The running game, traditionally an anchor for this program, it's lagged. And this isn't just coming from me. Other people have observed this. Other people have seen this. Other people have written about it. Alabama ranks near the bottom of the SEC in rushing yards per game. So that puts more pressure on Ty Simpson to win with his arm and timing. That's good for Oklahoma if they can be disruptive. So the key for Alabama is, can they establish the run early? Can they control the line of scrimmage? Can they set up manageable third downs? If not, they fall into that territory of one big play, and that's where Oklahoma thrives. The defense just needs to make one big play. So the Tide, they've got to show balance. They've got to complete tough runs. They've got to, give you some timely passes. They've got to take what this defense gives them. And Oklahoma's defense is not going to give them much. I think the second X factor for Alabama is containing Oklahoma's tempo. Oklahoma wants to play with a sense of urgency. They want to keep the defense off balance. They want to run plays. They want to get into rhythm. And Alabama's going to have to disrupt that tempo. They need to make Oklahoma feel like they're in a hostile stadium, because they are. They've got to win first downs. They've got to control the clock. They've got to get Oklahoma in third and long situations, and then they've got to get stops. Because if Alabama lets Oklahoma dictate pace, then the crowd, like we said, it's going to get quiet. And the momentum shifts. Alabama's advantage is home. Their crowd, their tradition. Those are advantages for the Tide, but they have to use them. And the best way to do that is force Oklahoma into uncomfortable sets. Third and long is Alabama's friend. Make the Sooners commit mistakes. We've seen this team is prone to that. And if Alabama controls the pace, then they really can bend Oklahoma's rhythm. Here's the third thing I think that Alabama has to overcome. I think it's a trap. They have the psychological X factor for being at home. And there's this thing of overconfidence. So you beat LSU 20-9, a solid win last week. But listen to what DeBoer said. It's always good to get a W. Certainly not satisfied with the way we played at times. So the narrative is this. Alabama's offense still has some work to do. And complacency can creep in at home. If Alabama expects this game to be, quote, business as usual, Oklahoma, they can exploit that. The Tide, they have to come out with urgency, just like Oklahoma does. Even though the Alabama's favored, they've got to have a sense of urgency, because road teams bring their own energy, and home teams have to respond to that. And if Alabama plays too relaxed, too comfortable, I think it gives Oklahoma an opening here. So who controls the X factor game? When we look at this matchup, when we look at it as a whole, the winner of this game might not be the team with the flashiest arguments or the biggest name, right? It might be the team that wins the X factor battle. Here's what I'm talking about. If John Mateer stays composed, and the defense holds that big play line, they just hold up and don't allow them. If they respond under fire, they tilt the game in their favor. The flip side of that is if Alabama is balanced on offense, if they control tempo, they treat this as a roadmap execution, rather than a marquee moment, the advantage shifts back to Alabama. One way to view it is like this. Oklahoma wants chaos. The Sooners want to thrive on the opponent getting sloppy. They want to make Alabama play that way. Alabama wants control. They want to maximize their home field advantage. And if the game becomes messy, that gives Oklahoma an edge. If the game becomes disciplined and methodical, then that gives Alabama the edge. So what are we watching for? I think there's three in-game cues that you want to look at. First quarter, let's start with the first quarter feel. How is Oklahoma's, how is their 3-and-out percentage, right? Does Alabama get a quick stop, or is Oklahoma converting into third downs? I guess converting third downs into first down. Brings up the second point, third down conversion rates, especially early in this game. Alabama getting the first down leads to rhythm. Oklahoma getting a third down stop, it gives, backdoor hope, if you will. And then let's count the big plays, the plays of 20-plus yards allowed. If one team allows 2 or more by halftime, I think the dynamic shifts dramatically to the team that's got those big plays. And that's your Captain Obvious statement here. But if Oklahoma holds, if they can hold Alabama to maybe just one big play, if they win by, if they win 60% of the third downs, they've put themselves in the driver's seat here. But if Alabama gets a couple of chunk plays, if Oklahoma's third down conversion's 40% or lower, that narrative really tilts Alabama's way. So here's where I'm landing on all of this. Obviously, we got more to go. We got 2 more segments here. But this, again, it's not about talent or reputation. This is about execution. It's about handling pressure. It's about seizing a moment. Oklahoma wants to prove that they belong, not just in the conference, but amongst the elite in the nation in the playoffs. And so you've got these X factors that we've talked about: quarterback composure, limiting big plays, tempo control, offensive balance, avoiding overconfidence. I think those things are what's really going to play more into deciding this game than any one individual big play or highlight. So I think this is really going to reveal a lot about both of these programs. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think we're going to have a lot to talk about next week.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
So I want to talk about one more thing before I get to my score prediction. I want to talk about what's really at stake for Oklahoma in this game. So we're in year 2 of Brent Venables in the SEC. Well, I guess we're in year 2 of Oklahoma in the SEC. And they've shown promise, right? But they've like we talked about in the opening segment, they still need that signature "we've arrived" moment. And I think a win Saturday gives them that. A win on Saturday firmly puts Oklahoma in the playoff conversation. They're there now, but it puts them there firmly. If Oklahoma beats Alabama on the road It's not just going to be notching a big win. They're going to jump from being a contender to like a contender with legs. All right, they're going to be 8-2, heading home for Missouri and LSU. Didn't mean to rhyme there, but we did it anyway. You got a 10-2 finish. That becomes incredibly realistic. And 10-2, Oklahoma's in the playoff. That's the kind of resume that says we belong, not only, not just to the fans, but to this whole committee thing. And that all hinges right here on this moment. This becomes the game that turns a good season into a great season. But it's not just about a win and getting into the playoffs. It's about credibility in the SEC. Oklahoma's trying to show that they don't just belong in the conference, but they can compete for championships in this conference. Beating Alabama in their house is going to deliver that message. It's going to say that the Sooners, they're not just visitors, they're challengers. Now, without that win, you might still have, a solid year, but no doubt about it, title hopes slip if you lose at Tuscaloosa. You go from hoping for the playoff, hoping to be in that conversation for the conference title to, yeah, that would have been nice, maybe next year. And that's not where we want to be. I think the bigger picture here is you got to look at recruiting as well. You got to look at national perception. You got to look at momentum. A road win against a blue blood program reshapes all of that. It reshapes how recruits think about you. It reshapes how the media talks about you. It reshapes how the future opponents see you. You're saying, hey, we're moving up. It's not just about the scoreboard. It's about establishing a culture of winning under pressure away from home on big stages. Oklahoma's invested heavily in this era. And a win accelerates their timeline. Now, if the Sooners lose on Saturday, they still stay respectable. That's how much progress they've made from 24 to 25. But the hole does get deep, a little bit deeper, right? In terms of trying to make it into the playoff. You got those two home games against Missouri and LSU, and you got to win those. And I think you got to win them big. And then you're going to need some chaos somewhere else. At 9-3, you may still sneak into the field, but you're in the waiting line, okay? That means the stress level is going to come up. Scrutiny is going to be on you if you do make it in, and it paints the season as a good but not special if you're out of the playoff. For Oklahoma, with the resources and the ambitions and everything that they've invested, that distinction matters. So you win this game if you're the Sooners and the light turns bright. You lose and you still have some fuel, but you're kind of burning it going into the wind. And, Alabama's got some things at stake here as well. The Tiger, they're defending more than just the game. They're defending their expectations. They're defending their traditions and their own positioning. They are on track for the SEC title game. That is undeniable. And beating Oklahoma on Saturday just keeps them in that hunt. It also keeps them, obviously, in position for a playoff berth and maybe even a first-round bye. But you lose to Oklahoma, it kind of throws a wrench into that machine. You don't just lose the game, you give up the narrative. I can't even speak. You give up the narrative that you're fallible, right? Especially at home, losing it. Everyone's going to say, what, they lost at home? So keeping the mission on track, if you're Alabama, it demands that you win this game. There's a reason why Bryant-Denny Stadium is a fortress. Losing at home to a conference opponent like Oklahoma kind of chips away at that lure. Playoff seeding, it gets impacted. If Alabama wants that top 4 seed, they've got to be dominant. They've got to win at home. And a loss here shifts them towards being good but vulnerable. And so for a program that's been defined by dominance, that's a rare label. And you look at national perception, the same one thing you did with Oklahoma. You look at recruiting. They have a brand that hinges on consistent excellence. So a high-profile home win reinforces the message to recruits that this is where champions are made. On the flip side, a loss gives pause to all that. Some recruits might just think, hey, maybe this isn't the unstoppable machine I thought it was. Maybe, Alabama, they can't afford perception cracks with the way this conference is growing, the way Georgia's right there neck and neck, the way you've got A&M rising, the way you got Texas, Oklahoma, Ole Miss lurking. And you're still not fully through that transition away from Nick Saban. That is still fresh in so many minds. And like we talked about earlier in the previous segment, there's a subtle danger here for Alabama to become complacent. So, success breeds expectation. But when expectation is high, performance pressure, it begins to intensify. And again, DeBoer said it himself, that he's coaching with more fire this season because he recognizes what is at stake. This means Alabama is aware of the pressure that is on them. But that doesn't make them immune. That's why this game matters so much to them. It's going to test whether the Tide's new era with DeBoer builds on the dominance that was there or just kind of echoes some legacy for this program. So if you're Alabama, right, you win and you keep your dominant narrative alive. Your path forward is pretty clear. You lose to Oklahoma on Saturday, and not only do you suffer on the scoreboard, you're going to suffer in some reputation as well. But let's do like we like to do on the Sooner Nation podcast. Let's zoom out a little bit. Because what's at stake here doesn't live solely in the box score on Saturday. It's going to span culture, legacy, recruiting, national conversation. Think about the recruiting impact for just a second. Both programs lean heavily on the ability to win big when it matters. And if you're a recruit, you're seeing your school beat a marquee opponent on the road, or you're seeing your school falter, that plays into the decision-making process. One dramatic night on national television, one big afternoon, it becomes a part of a storyline delivered in campus visits, highlight reels, and even NIL negotiations. And we know this. College football is not just about wins anymore. It's about identity. And identity has never mattered more than it does right now in the realm of college athletics. And that's why I talk about it a lot. In Oklahoma, in their early part of the SEC play, they want to be seen as a challenger. They don't want the newcomer label anymore. In Alabama, they want to be seen as timeless, not transitional. And these are the identities that are influenced by the media, by the way these teams are covered, by the way that they're talked about on the national broadcasts and the pregame shows. And every win, every loss becomes a talking point. And again, let's not forget, for both programs, playoff inclusion means more money. It means more exposure. It means more alumni excitement. And for Oklahoma, establishing, right away that they belong in this conference, it delivers kind of a major long-term dividends. For Alabama, you're trying to maintain the status quo of who you are in the SEC. That means keeping the pipeline of championships, visibility, and resources fully in motion. Athletic programs live and die on momentum. And a win here for either program builds a springboard into future seasons. And a loss for either program is going to demand recalibration. Maybe not a crisis, but at a minimum, you got to refocus. What is that going to do? It's going to influence culture. It's going to how about this? Culture is influenced less by the wins themselves, but more by how programs react to big moments. And I think Saturday offers a chance to show strength of culture for both programs. So what's the bottom line here? What am I getting at? Well, here it is. When you strip everything away, this game is about control. Control of your narrative, control of your season, control of your destiny. Oklahoma controls their fate only if they seize this moment. Alabama controls theirs only if they refuse to slip out of mission mode. Every down, every third and long, every sideline reaction, they're not just plays. Those are going to be signposts for what's going to happen next. Not just in this game, but the week after on the recruiting trail, National Signing Day coming up next month. If you're a Sooner fan, this is your chance to watch your team switch into a higher gear. If you're an Alabama fan, this is your chance to see your team reaffirm why their tradition matters. Either way, what happens Saturday, I think it's going to echo through the final few weeks of the season and into next season, into the next recruiting class, into the next chapter of either one of these programs. That's the tradition and the pageantry. That's the level of pressure that's on this game Saturday. So what's my prediction? I got you right after this. Well, let's wrap it up then, all right? Let's talk about the money line. Not quite the money line, but let's talk about the spread, I guess. Because you got two elite defenses here. Sometimes the smart money, when you got two elite defenses colliding, sometimes the smart money is not just on who wins, but how they win or how close it stays. So I'm gonna put a lens here, and we're gonna zoom in a little bit. We're gonna talk about one thing before I give you my score prediction. I think Oklahoma is more likely to cover this point spread than Alabama. Sooners are +7 right now. Now, I'm going to give you my score prediction. Okay, we'll get to that. But I want to talk about covering for just a second, because staying with that line, it's not about upsetting, right? I mean, you're +7. That means you got to lose by less than 7 points. And when you look at the numbers, when you look at the trends in the matchups, those 7 points with Oklahoma, they start to look like a value here. You look at Oklahoma's defense, they've been elite. They rank in the top 10 nationally in scoring defense. They're one of the best units against the run. They're top 5. You look at Alabama's offense, they've had their moments, but their run game has been inconsistent and their offense has not really blown teams away. So when you've got a great defense facing an offense that's not elite and hasn't been dominant, the spread shrinks. So Alabama being a 5 to 6 point favorite, it suggests that the market expects this to be a one-score game. And if you're getting Oklahoma at +7, you're in good shape. Because I think you look at this, I think you're going to look at a low-score expectation here in this game. You got an over-under hovering around 45.5 to 46.5, depending on which book you look at. So that's low for two big programs. So what does that tell us? A low title implies that the guys that, the powers that be, they expect a defensive battle. They expect fewer possessions. They expect slowing down of the tempo. They expect tighter margins. And that environment, a full touchdown advantage that Alabama has, it's a little bit less safe. So if Oklahoma keeps it within a field goal or a one score, then not only do they cover, they put themselves in position to win. And that's why I wanted to talk about that one score, that +7, for just a minute. And the Sooners, they've done well against the spread away from home this year. I think they're 3-1 on the road against the spread. But the flip side of that is Alabama's perfect against the spread at home. So, those kind of balance each other out. But perfect doesn't mean invulnerable, especially when the game script suggests a tight defensive fight. And when you combine that trend with the spread and the matchup, Oklahoma, again, +7, it starts to look like the Sooners have a shot here. So let's put this all together. I see a game like this. Here's how I see it going. I see both defenses working hard to control it. I can see it being a 3-point game at the half. Alabama 10-7, 13-10. And I think Oklahoma stays in this. I think they stay in every drive. I don't think, coming off the bye week, being rested, I don't see Oklahoma beating themselves with turnovers or breakdowns. The fourth quarter is where this game's going to be decided. And I think, well, before I give you my score, let me just tell you this. Okay, let me say this. For the first time all season long, I picked Oklahoma to lose the Tennessee game. It's the first time I've gone against the Sooners. I picked them to lose, and what do? They won. So I kind of feel like maybe I shouldn't pick Oklahoma to win again this season. I really kind of feel like this is a game where Oklahoma is just slightly outmatched. You walk away with a respectable loss if you're the Sooners. I've got a final score of Alabama 20, Oklahoma 17. So, but again, that puts Oklahoma in position. That means a play here, a play there. The Sooners come out of Tuscaloosa with an upset. It's very much a possibility. If you're Oklahoma, forcing third down stops early in this game, holding Alabama to 10 points or less in the first half, you're in good shape. But if Alabama puts up a couple of easy scores early, if they stretch the lead to 14 plus before the half, you're in bad shape. If Oklahoma runs the ball well, if they control the clock, if they limit Alabama's possessions, good shape, right? You see how Oklahoma, this game could turn on a turnover, giving Alabama short field position, doing that multiple times. Those are all the things that swing this. I think this is a very winnable game for Oklahoma. And I expect the Sooners to be in the thick of it in the fourth quarter. So there it is. That's my prediction. I somewhat superstitious here. Absolutely want to be wrong here. But give me, I just hate saying it. But give me Alabama 20, Oklahoma 17. And then obviously, we're going to be back to talk about it. But enjoy the game. I can't wait. I get to be in Oklahoma and watch it with my folks. I'm so pumped. Enjoy it, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon.